I never believed the course of a girl's entire life could shift in a single breath. But mine did on a cold autumn morning, with the sound of my father's silence echoing louder than any storm. We were sitting at the edge of our crumbling estate, the last of my mother's rose vines clinging to the trellis, dried and forgotten. I was still in my university uniform, my bag on my lap, untouched coffee cooling beside me. My father looked old that day, older than I'd ever seen him. His hands trembled when he held the letter, the kind of tremble that doesn't come from age, but from guilt, and when he finally met my eyes, he said the words that unstitched the girl I had been. "You have to marry him." I didn't know who him was, not yet, just that he was wealthy, powerful, dangerous in the ways men with too much money and not enough soul could be. "It's the only way to save us," he continued, voice hoarse, shame dragging every syllable down like, "Oh wait, they'll take the house, the land, the last piece of your mother's name. But he made an offer for you." I sat frozen. Somewhere deep inside, something cracked slow, silent. Final. He had sold me, not in chains, not in backroom deals, but in ink and desperation. In the kind of silent surrender only poor men make, when pride becomes dust and daughters become currency. His name was Alessandro Marchesi, the kind of name that sounded carved in marble. He was Italian. Billionaire, widely photographed but rarely seen, a man with estates in 6 countries, his face on magazine covers and no warmth in his eyes. I knew his name from whispers, from headlines that never used words like kind or gentle. Ruthless, cold, brilliant, that was his reputation, and soon his ring would be on my finger. I didn't cry, not that day. I went inside, packed my things, stood in front of the mirror and stared at the girl with soft brown eyes and trembling fingers, who still believed in love stories. Then I closed the suitcase and her chapter with it. The wedding was arranged quickly. 3 days later, I found myself flown to Florence, dressed in ivory lace inside a cathedral that smelled of stone and old prayers. The air felt too heavy to breathe. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Around me, there were no familiar faces, no bridesmaids, no music, just strangers in tuxedos. And somewhere down the aisle, the man who would become my husband, he stood there, like a statue. Alessandro Marchesi, black suit, silver cufflinks, no smile. When I met his gaze, I felt something dark coil in my stomach. His eyes weren't cruel, they were colder than cruelty. Cruelty is emotional. This man looked at me like I was nothing, like I was already his. The priest's voice faded in and out. My name sounded wrong coming from his lips. The vow I repeated felt like someone else's, and when he slid the ring onto my hand, cold, perfect, expensive, I felt ownership settle into my bones. He kissed me then. Not tender, not rough, just firm, possessive, like sealing a deal. The applause was minimal, as if everyone already knew this wasn't a love story, just a transaction. A promise between 2 families, one desperate, one dangerous. Later that night, in the grand suite of an ancient villa overlooking Florence's moonlit skyline, he dismissed the staff with a gesture. He closed the door, locked it, and turned to face me. I could barely stand, my knees were soft, my breath caught. He walked slowly like a man in no hurry, like a predator with time. "I don't like liars," he said, his voice deep, polished, and indifferent. "So don't pretend to want this." I didn't, but I didn't speak. I stood in silence, waiting for something, kindness, cruelty, anything, but he offered none of it, just a look. One that stripped me bare without touching me. "You'll learn," he said quietly. "You'll learn what it means to be mine." And just like that, I knew this wasn't going to be a marriage. This was going to be a surrender, one I hadn't chosen, one I couldn't escape. One that would change every part of me, one piece at a time. And yet, somewhere in the shadows of that moment, I felt a pull. Not desire, not even curiosity. Just the quiet realization that this man, this cruel, unreadable, untouchable man was going to destroy me, and I didn't know yet if I wanted to stop him. The door clicked shut behind him, the sound echoing louder than it should have in a room filled with marble and moonlight. I stood by the edge of the window, the silk of my wedding dress brushing against the floor like a whisper I couldn't control. Outside, Florence glittered, rooftops dipped in gold, shadows stretching long like arms reaching for things they'd never touch. But inside that suite, time didn't move. It breathed, it waited, it dared. Alessandro didn't speak again. He poured himself a drink from a crystal decanter, amber liquid catching the lamplight, then turned and leaned against the antique table like he owned not just the villa, but the world. Maybe he did, maybe that was the point. "You don't have to pretend," he said finally, swirling the glass. "I know what you are." I didn't know what he meant, virgin, prisoner, a payment, but I didn't ask. I was afraid of what he might say, of how he might say it. He approached slowly, not with warmth, not with menace, just certainty. The kind that made the walls feel closer, the air thinner. He stopped inches in front of me, and with one hand lifted my chin. His fingers were warm, Steady. I hated that my skin reacted like it had a voice of its own. I don't expect you to feel anything for me tonight, he murmured. But you'll remember it. My breath hitched, not from fear, but confusion. This wasn't what I expected. I thought he'd strip me down with cruel hands. Use me like he owned me, but Alessandro didn't move with impatience. He moved like he was studying something delicate, something alive. He reached for the zipper of my dress, his fingers trailing down my back with a slowness that made my stomach twist. I closed my eyes. I didn't want to see his expression. I didn't want to see myself in the mirror across the room. The girl who used to believe in fairy tales, now standing half naked in front of a man she didn't choose. The fabric slid from my shoulders like falling petals. I stood there in silence, the cold air brushing against bare skin, feeling more exposed than I ever had. But Alessandro said nothing, no crude comment, no praise. Just that same unreadable expression in his eyes. Then he touched me, not where I expected. His hands brushed my collarbone, my arms, the curve of my waist, not rough, not urgent. Just present. I trembled, not from shame. Not entirely, but from something that made me feel like the room was tilting. When he kissed me, it wasn't soft. It wasn't cruel either. It was inevitable. His lips tasted like whiskey and power. And when his hand cradled the back of my neck, I didn't pull away. I didn't know why. He didn't rush. He didn't tear anything. He laid me on the bed, like I was something meant to be unwrapped slowly. I hated that part of me responded. That when he touched my thigh, a gasp escaped my lips without permission. That when he looked at me, I couldn't look away. His body was carved from control, every motion measured, every breath deliberate, and yet there was something wild under the surface, something unspoken that made me want to run or stay. When he entered me, I cried out, not just from the pain of it, not just from the shock, but because I knew in that moment nothing would ever be the same. My body had been mine, now it answered to him, and the worst part, it didn't want to stop. He didn't speak during it, just watched, moved, took over and over, until my skin was burning and my thoughts were drowned in the rhythm of a man who didn't ask but didn't need to, a man who claimed not through violence but through precision. By the time the room was quiet again, I couldn't breathe right. My hands clutched the sheets like they might keep me from floating away. He lay beside me, silent, composed. I felt broken, new, shattered into pieces I couldn't recognize. I turned my head to look at him. Alessandro Marchesi, the cruel millionaire, the man who bought my future with a pen and a promise, lay inches away, breathing evenly like he hadn't just rewritten my entire existence. He opened his eyes, looked at me. You'll stop fearing me, he said, voice low, eventually, and then he turned away like what had happened meant nothing. But to me, it was everything. The sun rose without my permission. Its golden light slipped through the lace curtains, bathing the room in warmth that felt almost cruel. My eyes opened to the weight of unfamiliar silk sheets, the scent of perfume and sweat lingering in the air, and the unmistakable presence of him, Alessandro, lying beside me, his arm draped across the mattress like a silent claim. I didn't move at first. My body was sore, my legs trembling faintly from the night before. But it wasn't the physical ache that stunned me, it was the silence. The cold, stunning silence that followed a storm you never asked for. I had given something away, something I had never intended to surrender, not just my virginity, but the idea that I belonged only to myself. I pulled the sheet over my chest and sat up slowly, careful not to disturb him. His face in sleep was peaceful, almost beautiful, but it didn't soften what he'd done, what I had allowed. I padded barefoot across the polished floors to the mirror, and when I saw my reflection, I didn't recognize her. Lips swollen from kissing, a bruise blooming faintly along my shoulder, hair tangled in a way that told the whole story. I looked like a woman, but inside, I still felt like a girl trying to wake up from a nightmare that had dressed itself in satin. I wanted to cry, but the tears wouldn't come. Behind me, I heard the sheets shift. I froze. You're up early, came his voice, husky and still heavy with sleep. I didn't answer right away. I couldn't. He sat up, bare chest catching the morning light, his hair tousled and perfect in a way that made me angry. How could he look untouched, unbothered, after changing everything? Don't run from it, he said, as if reading my mind. It was going to happen. You knew that. My jaw clenched. Knowing and wanting aren't the same. He swung his legs off the bed and stood, walking toward me with that same unhurried ease, the kind of quiet confidence that made the floor feel smaller beneath my feet. He reached out and gently touched my shoulder, but I stepped away. It was instinct, not rebellion, just survival. Something flickered in his eyes. Not regret, not guilt, just recognition, like he'd seen this before. Maybe in other women he'd broken. You'll understand, he said quietly, reaching for a silk robe and handing it to me. In time, I put it on because I had nothing else, because it was easier than standing bare in front of him again. We had breakfast on the terrace. The view stretched out over Florence stone rooftops, distant domes, morning fog curling through narrow alleys. It was beautiful, but it felt wasted on me. I couldn't taste the coffee, I couldn't meet his gaze. He didn't press me, he didn't speak much at all, just watched, observed. As if waiting for something in me to shift. You'll come to like this life, he said eventually, his voice smooth, casual, terrifying in its certainty. People think freedom is found in choices. It's not, it's in surrender. I stared at him. You mean obedience? He smirked, sipping his espresso. Call it what you like. But I've never taken a woman who didn't eventually thank me for it. His arrogance didn't shock me anymore, it drained me. What stunned me was that a part of me, tiny, buried deep, wasn't entirely sure he was wrong. The rest of the day passed in a blur. I was dressed by someone else, led through corridors by silent staff, shown rooms I didn't care about, a life already built for me, waiting for me to slip into it like a second skin. But inside, I still wore the shame. That night, I didn't wait for him in bed. I curled up on a chaise in the corner of the room, arms wrapped around my knees, watching the moonlight crawl across the floor. When he entered, I didn't look at him. I just listened to his footsteps, to the pause when he noticed where I was. He didn't speak. He undressed silently, walked past me, and slid into the bed without a word. But I felt him watching, felt the weight of his gaze like gravity pulling me out of myself. I didn't move, not until the early hours when exhaustion made my body betray me again. I rose, walked to the bed like a ghost, and slid under the covers beside him, not because I wanted to, not because he asked, but because even in pain, even in confusion, I couldn't sleep anywhere else. He didn't touch me. Not that night, but he didn't need to. I already belonged to him more than I wanted to admit. And somehow, that was worse than everything that had come before. The next morning, I found a velvet box resting silently on the marble vanity unopened, gleaming beneath the early light like it knew exactly what it meant. I hadn't heard him come in, I hadn't asked for anything. But there it was, a message wrapped in velvet, a message with no words, but all the weight of control. I approached it cautiously, like it might bite. Inside, nestled in black silk, was a necklace delicate in design but powerful in its intention. A single teardrop diamond set on a chain so fine it looked like a whisper. It wasn't just beautiful. It was breathtaking, timeless, probably worth more than my father's entire estate. But it wasn't a gift. It was a collar. I touched it with trembling fingers, not because I was moved, but because I knew what it meant. He didn't ask me to wear it. He didn't need to. Alessandro gave gifts the way kings used to brand their property, with ceremony and expectation. I didn't want to put it on, but I did. The moment the cold metal touched my skin, I felt it, the shift. A line drawn, a boundary erased. I was his bride by law, his plaything by night, and now his reflection by day. He appeared behind me in the mirror, silent, composed, wearing a tailored suit and that unreadable look that made every nerve in my body stand up. His hand reached out and touched the clasp behind my neck, fastening the necklace without a word. I watched his eyes in the mirror, how calm they were, how certain. It suits you, he said softly. I said nothing. We left for the city shortly. After the driver waited downstairs, a private car, black as midnight, with tinted windows and soft leather seats that smelled like luxury and captivity. He sat beside me but didn't touch me. Instead, he placed a hand lightly on my thigh, just a little pressure, just enough to remind me, you're mine. Florence looked different from the back seat of his car. The city I once dreamed of visiting now felt foreign, distant, like a painting behind glass. He took me to places people like me didn't go, an exclusive jeweler where I was fitted for bracelets I didn't ask for, a boutique where attendants whispered and bowed, and brought out dresses worth more than my education. I stood there as they draped me in fabrics, cashmere, silk, velvet, each one thinner than my resistance. He watched from a chair in the corner, legs crossed, silent, eyes never leaving mine. He was molding me with every look, every purchase, every command disguised as a suggestion. Alessandro was sculpting the woman he wanted the world to see on his arm, beautiful, obedient, mysterious. Claimed that afternoon, he took me to lunch in a rooftop garden restaurant that overlooked the entire city. I could smell basil in the air, could hear the soft clink of silverware and distant Italian laughter. I should have felt wonder. I felt hollow. The waiter greeted him by name, Mr. Marchesi. No one looked at me, not until he lifted my hand and kissed it across the table, the diamond necklace catching sunlight like a flare. Only then did the eyes come, curious, envious, respectful. They all saw what he wanted them to see, his possession. As the meal unfolded, small bites I barely tasted, he told me about the Marchesi vineyards in Tuscany, about the art collection in Rome, about the Monaco estate with its private cove. It was like he was laying bricks, building a castle of expectation around me, one story at a time. You'll see it all, he said. cutting into his steak. You'll stand beside me at dinners, fundraisers, openings. They'll photograph you. They'll want to be you, but they won't have what I have. His eyes found mine again, you. And just like that, my appetite vanished. That night, I stood alone on the villa balcony, watching the stars bleed into the black sky. My fingers traced the cold metal around my neck. I should have taken it off. I should have thrown it over the railing, but I didn't, because the truth was, I didn't know where he ended and I began anymore. Because somewhere beneath the fear, beneath the shame, was something worse, a flicker of want. Not for the necklace, for him. He said we needed to get away. Just for a few days, someplace quiet, Alessandro told me. As if the villa we already lived in wasn't palatial enough, but I knew better. This wasn't about quiet, it was about control, moving me, molding me, placing me where his presence could carve deeper into the parts of me still trying to resist. We left early in the morning. No luggage, no explanation. Just a sleek black car and silence stretching between us like thread pulled to tight. I watched the trees blur past the window, wondering if my father ever thought about me, if he regretted what he'd done. I wondered if he could even afford regret. By midday, we arrived at a villa nestled between hills of olive trees and wild lavender, far from Florence. Far from the noise of the world. The air smelled like old stone and warm earth. It was beautiful, in a way that felt ancient, untouched, but not safe. Nothing with him ever felt safe. As the staff disappeared, Alessandro led me inside. The place was silent, no music, no footsteps. Just the echo of my own heartbeat. The interior was golden and rustic, with sunlight filtering through high windows, casting shadows that moved like secrets. I like it here, he said simply, pouring himself a drink and offering none to me. I nodded. What else could I do? He set the glass down and turned to face me. His eyes scanned me slowly, no rush, no modesty, just ownership. And then, without a word, he crossed the space between us, hands at my waist, pulling me forward until I was pressed against his chest. I want you, he murmured. And though the words were soft, they struck me like a command. I didn't resist. Maybe I couldn't. He kissed me then, not with violence, but with something more dangerous, intention, slow, deep and claiming. He stripped me with patient fingers, as though undressing a secret, layer by layer. And when I stood before him, bare in the middle of that stone villa, the only thing I wore was his gaze. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. He pressed me back against a pillar, the cold of it shocking against my spine, and then his hands were on me. Familiar and searching, my body reacted before my mind could catch up. A moan escaped me, soft, shameful, but real. You like that, he said, voice low against my ear. Don't lie. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. My body was already speaking for me. He lifted me, carried me across the room to a long velvet chaise. The contrast between its softness and the hardness of his control made every second more vivid. He laid me down like I was fragile, then showed me I wasn't, not anymore. His mouth followed his hands, mapping me, claiming me, erasing the lines of who I used to be. And when he took me, it was slow at first, reverent even, but it built into something else, something raw and consuming. I lost myself in it, in him, in the rhythm of a man who didn't just want me but needed me in ways he never said out loud. Again and again, he brought me to the edge, then pulled me back, like he was teaching me that pleasure could be a lesson and I was an obedient student. When it was over, I was trembling, breathless, every nerve lit and heavy with what we'd done. He collapsed beside me, sweat cooling on our skin, his arm around me like a shackle I didn't want to break. Do you still hate me? He asked quietly, brushing my hair back. I didn't answer right away, because hate wasn't the word anymore. I didn't know what it was, but it lived deeper than that. No, I whispered finally. And it was the most honest thing I'd said since our wedding day. He smiled, the corner of his mouth lifting in something dangerously close to tenderness. I didn't think you would, he said, and kissed my shoulder like a seal on a deal I didn't know I'd agreed to. The days that followed blurred like brush strokes on a canvas painted to quickly, colors bleeding, edges soft and meaning uncertain. The villa became a strange kind of limbo, suspended between silence and the tension that seemed to pulse beneath every glance, every breath. Alessandro didn't demand anything of me, but he didn't need to. His presence alone filled the room like gravity. He didn't pull me toward him. I simply drifted. He started talking more, not about feelings, never that, but about his past. Little things. He spoke about his vineyards in Tuscany and the woman who used to teach him piano when he was 6. He told me about the day he found out his mother had died, not in a broken whisper, but like it was a business transaction. He was 10. He never cried. I learned early, he said one evening over dinner, that emotion is a currency people use to manipulate. So I stopped spending it. I didn't respond. I just watched him, the way he cut his food with precision, the way his voice never wavered, like pain had been made sterile inside him, a clean wound. A locked vault. And yet, something had shifted. He was still cold, but there were cracks in the armor, small ones, subtle. The way his hand lingered on mine for a moment too long when he passed the salt. The way he brushed a strand of hair behind my ear without looking like it meant anything. But it did. It meant everything. One morning, I found a room I hadn't seen before, a study filled with books in 6 languages, old records, and a grand piano covered in dust. I touched the keys softly. Let one note ring out into the still air. It hung there like a secret. You play? He asked from the doorway, startling me. I turned quickly, a little. My mother taught me when I was a child. Play something, he said, stepping inside. I hesitated, but then, with fingers unsure, I played. Just a simple tune, nothing perfect, nothing impressive, but it was enough. When I glanced up, I didn't see a billionaire watching me. I saw a man remembering something, someone he'd locked away. I haven't heard that in 20 years. He said quietly. I didn't ask what it reminded him of. I didn't need to. Later that afternoon, we walked through the olive groves behind the villa. The sun was soft, the wind smelled like rosemary, and for once, he didn't seem like the man who had stolen my freedom. He walked beside me like he belonged there, like we both did. You never asked me why, he said suddenly. Why what? Why I chose you? I hesitated. Would it matter if I did? He stopped walking, turned to face me. I don't know, he said honestly, but I think maybe I needed someone untouched. Someone not already ruined by this world. I didn't expect you to ruin me instead. His words hit harder than I expected, because beneath them was something I hadn't dared to hope for: vulnerability. The kind men like him weren't supposed to feel or admit. That night, he didn't claim me with urgency. He touched me like he wanted to remember how my skin felt, how my breath sounded, how my eyes closed when his lips found the places that made me lose myself. And when he entered me, it wasn't to possess, it was to connect. His forehead rested against mine. His hands cradled my hips like they were fragile, and for the first time, I didn't feel like his. I felt like ours. Afterwards, we lay there, in the dim light, his fingers tracing idle lines along my spine. No words, just silence that didn't feel empty anymore. It felt earned, and as I drifted off to sleep, one thought echoed in my mind, quiet but undeniable: he's changing, or maybe I am. The night I decided to run wasn't cold, it wasn't stormy, it was quiet to quiet. The kind of quiet that wraps around your chest and makes you believe, just for a moment, that you can rewrite your fate if you move fast enough. I stood by the open French doors of the villa's guest room, barefoot, still wearing the silk robe he'd laid across the bed hours before. My heart pounded like a secret trying to break free. I don't know what triggered it. Maybe it was the way he kissed me that morning, not cruelly, not forcefully, but gently, like we were something real. Maybe it was the way he looked at me after, like I was already part of his future. That was the moment I knew I had to leave, because I wasn't sure anymore if I was falling for him or just forgetting who I used to be. I moved silently, grabbing the small bag I'd hidden days earlier under a loose floorboard near the study. A passport, a wad of euros, one dress, one shot. The hallway was bathed in shadow. The staff had long gone to their quarters, and Alessandro was asleep. At least, I hoped he was. My breath felt like it echoed in the hallway as I stepped past the study, past the music room, toward the side entrance that led to the garage. Freedom was 5 feet away. Then 2, and then his voice. Don't. It wasn't loud, it wasn't angry, but it stopped me like a blade at my throat. I turned slowly, bag still in hand, heart breaking open inside my chest. He stood at the end of the corridor, barefoot, shirtless, eyes unreadable in the dark. I wasn't going to stop you, he said softly. I just needed to know if you still wanted to leave. I swallowed. You gave me no choice when you took me. His eyes flinched, just slightly. And now? I couldn't answer because the truth was messier than either of us could bear. I didn't want to leave because I hated him. I wanted to leave because I was beginning to forget why I ever did. Because I was starting to crave the moments I used to resent the way he touched me, looked at me, said nothing but made me feel everything. I don't know who I am with you anymore, I whispered. You're still her, he replied, but you're more. I wanted to believe him, but belief requires safety. And nothing about him had ever felt safe, only magnetic, dangerous. Beautiful in the way fire is beautiful right before it burns. Everything you are. He walked toward me slowly. Not touching, not demanding. Just there, present, a storm restrained by will alone. I meant it when I said I wouldn't force you. He said, if you want to go, go. My fingers tightened around the bag, my breath caught. My body screamed for movement, but I didn't run, I didn't move. I stood there trembling with the weight of a decision. No woman should ever have to stay in the arms of the man who bought you, or run from the only place that had ever made you feel something that resembled home. And that was the problem, wasn't it? This place, this man, this strange world of silk sheets, dark whispers, and hands that both owned and healed me. It had started to feel like home. I let the bag drop to the floor. He stepped forward, arms reaching out, hesitant for the first time. When he wrapped them around me, I didn't resist. I collapsed into him like I'd been waiting for that moment all my life. I hate that you own me. I murmured into his chest. I don't, he said, pressing a kiss to my hair. You just haven't realized yet you own me too. And just like that, the escape turned into surrender. But not the kind I feared, not the kind he demanded this time. I gave it freely. That night was different. I didn't tremble when he touched me. I didn't flinch when his fingers brushed the edge of my waist. I wasn't ashamed of the way his lips searched for mine like they'd been starved of something only I could give. For the first time, I wasn't being claimed. I was the one doing the claiming. We stood in the center of the room, the fireplace crackling softly behind us, casting golden shadows across the stone floor. I reached for the buttons of his shirt first, something I'd never done before, my hands steady. My eyes locked on his. He didn't stop me, he just watched. As if every second was a revelation he hadn't prepared for, his shirt slipped from his shoulders. Like a burden he'd carried too long. The weight of control, of expectation, of being untouchable suddenly, it was all gone. I'm not afraid of you anymore, I said, not as a challenge, but as a truth. He nodded, voice quiet. Then you finally see me. No more orders, no more force, no more walls between us. I ran my fingers down his chest. Felt the rhythm of his breath, the tension in his muscles. He was beautiful not just in the way he looked, but in the way he surrendered to me without speaking, without needing to assert dominance. When he reached for me, I guided his hand instead. We didn't rush, we didn't race, it was slow, gentle, reverent. I led him to the bed, pulled him down beside me, and for the first time, I kissed him not out of fear or obligation, but out of desire I couldn't explain. A want that had grown somewhere beneath the bruises of our beginning, something real, something terrifying. He kissed me back like he'd been waiting for this, for me to make the choice, and when he entered me, it wasn't a transaction, it wasn't a lesson, it was connection. We moved together in silence. His hand cupping my face, his eyes never leaving mine. I saw everything in them this time, not just hunger or control, but questions, longing. Surrender, tell me what you want, he whispered. I didn't speak, I showed him. My body arched to meet his. My fingers tangled in his hair. My lips traced the edges of his jaw like a prayer I didn't know I was saying. He followed. Responded, offered himself to me without hesitation. No masks, no cruelty. Just skin and soul, breath and pulse. For the first time, it wasn't about him taking from me. It was about me giving, because I wanted to, because I needed to. And in the stillness afterward, when his head rested against my shoulder and his breath calmed beside mine, I understood something no vow, no diamond, no cruel demand could have taught me. I had the power now, not over him, but over myself. Over who I had become in the arms of the man who once broke me open and now, quietly, was learning how to put me back together. The shift between us didn't happen all at once, it happened quietly, in the spaces between words. In the way his hand lingered just a second longer on the small of my back when we passed through a doorway, and how his voice softened when he said my name. Alessandro didn't become someone new. He became someone honest, less polished, less guarded. And the girl who had once stood trembling in white lace, had become the wife he never saw coming. It started with the little things. He invited me into meetings, at first just to sit silently, but then to speak. He asked my opinion on art, on design, on the placement of new sculptures in the Marquesi Foundation's galleries. I thought it was a test. It wasn't. He actually listened. Sometimes he even changed his mind. You don't talk just to fill space, he said once, fingers tracing the rim of his glass. That's rare. I didn't know whether to take it as a compliment, but I smiled anyway. We traveled Rome, Capri, Monaco, and everywhere we went, he introduced me not as a wife he had taken, but as a partner. People stared, of course they did. They looked at me like I was a mystery they couldn't solve, like they could sense I hadn't come from his world, but somehow, I was reshaping it from within. And he let me sometimes. I caught him watching me across crowded rooms, not with lust, not with pride, with awe. Like I'd become something untouchable, even to him. One evening, back at the villa, he walked into the room holding a book, an old novel I had once mentioned loving in passing. I had it flown in from Paris, he said, setting it beside me without ceremony. First edition. It wasn't the grandness of the gesture that hit me, it was that he remembered, that he listened. That somewhere between the fire and the silence, he'd started to care in ways he didn't know how to express with words. But not everything was easy. One morning, while we were walking through the courtyard of a property he was restoring in Florence, a woman appeared. She was tall, elegant, venomous in the way only a scorned lover could be. Her name was Celeste, and I didn't need anyone to tell me who she had once been to him. I didn't think you'd marry a peasant, she said, her smile sharp. Alessandro stepped forward immediately. Careful, she's just another phase. Celeste sneered, you'll bore of her too, before I could speak. Alessandro turned to her with a calm that felt like the edge of a blade. No, he said. She's the only thing I've ever chosen that didn't ruin me. Celeste left. In silence. But I stood frozen. The wind lifting my hair as if to remind me how fragile it all still was. That night, I asked him. I needed to know, what was I to you? In the beginning, he didn't hesitate. An escape from myself, a way to control. Something when everything else felt out of reach. And now, he reached for my hand. Kissed it softly. Now, his voice cracked ever so slightly. You're the only real thing I have. It wasn't a confession. It was a surrender. I looked at him, not the millionaire. Not the powerful man with 6 estates and a name that carried weight like a weapon. But the man who had learned how to let me in. He didn't expect a wife like me, but I had become the woman he could no longer live without. The final time he claimed me, it wasn't about dominance. It wasn't about control. It was about love, the kind that arrives not like fireworks, but like morning light, slow, certain. Warm against your skin before you even realize you've stepped out of the dark. It happened on the Amalfi Coast, in a villa carved into the cliffs, overlooking the endless blue sea. He didn't plan it as a grand gesture. There was no diamond, no crowd, no applause. Just the two of us, tangled in linen sheets, sea breeze blowing through open windows. And the kind of silence that didn't need to be filled. I was sitting on the edge of the bed, brushing the tangles from my hair when he came up behind me. No suit, no mask. Just Alessandro, barefoot, quiet and human. You don't belong to me anymore, he said. His voice low. I turned, confused. What do you mean? He knelt in front of me, not to propose. Not to beg, but to be eye level with the woman he had once taken without asking. You don't belong to me, he said again. Because I'm the one who belongs to you now. I would give everything. Up every property, every dollar, every empire if it meant keeping your heartbeat beside mine. I couldn't speak, my throat tightened. The same man who once whispered, you're mine, in a voice laced with power and possession, now looked at me as if I were the very thing holding him together, and I believed him. Because love like this doesn't arrive in declarations. It reveals itself in growth. He took my hand and kissed the inside of my wrist like it was sacred. I've done unforgivable things, he said, but if you let me, I'll spend the rest of my life giving you the version of myself that only you've ever been able to reach. That night, he didn't rush. He didn't dominate. He held me like a man holds a woman he's terrified to lose. Every touch was a vow, every breath a prayer. And when we moved together, it wasn't a performance. It wasn't survival, it was home. I cried, not because I was hurt, but because I wasn't anymore. We lay beneath the stars after, the salt air cooling our skin. His hand resting over my heart like he finally understood what it meant to feel. I'll never let you go, he whispered. And for the first time since the day I'd been sold into this strange life, I smiled. Good, I said. Because I'll never ask you to. The days that followed weren't perfect. The past didn't vanish. There were shadows, questions, old wounds we'd both carry. But the love between us was no longer chained to control or shame. It was born again, this time with choice, with trust, with the kind of fire that builds, not burns. The world still looked at me like I was a mystery. They didn't understand how a girl forced into a marriage with a cruel millionaire could end up the reason he became human, but I knew, because I didn't just survive the man who claimed me. I changed him. And in the end, we didn't belong to power or pain or expectation. We belonged to each other.